Hello and welcome back to Parents Canada Talk Radio on Saga 960. You're here with Lisa Durante and my co-host is finally back.
Finally back. Jason Thompson, hi.
Yeah, you were only gone for a week, but it did feel, you were missed anyhow. So
I listened to the show. Katie was amazing. You guys are incredible.
Katie was great. It was a great conversation. And it was a great guest as well. So it all really, really came together well. So how was vacation? And this has been a big week. You had vacation. You had one kid in high school. You had one going to university. Tell me.
It's you can trace those weeks as a parent when everything changes and everything's changing. I personally, I've probably for about a year, just over a year now, I knew that this has been coming, and it's really affected, I think, my mood overall. I found that, and I've talked about it on the show, but embracing kind of a bit of the sadness and things like that, knowing that, one of them was heading out, another one was heading off to high school at her mom's place. So she's been mostly at my place, now heading down to her mom's place to be there for the majority of the time. So I became almost an empty nester. So I'm basically going to put all of my energy into my 8-year-old now. But it's, this week was kind of the moment. I feared it a lot. I don't love the first week of September ever. I think maybe you and I have different perspectives on that you love the return of the routine and things like that. But I actually hate that. I really find that I bond very much with my kids over the course of the summer and the time that we have together and the more leisurely pace. So I was worried, and all summer I was hyper aware, we're going to the Sound of Music Festival in Burlington. This is the last time we're going to do this together. And we're going to the CNE together. And this is the last time we're going to do all this. And so the day of, and I was really becoming more cognizant of it with my son who was heading off to university, that I didn't want to ruin that experience for him. It's not about me. I mean, I have my own things, and I put that on the table. But when we moved him in on Sunday, I was really clear with myself to be really careful that I didn't allow it and just enjoy the moment. That was what I asked myself to do. And I did. And it was great. He moved in. I got to meet his roommates. I took him out for lunch. We went to the craziest Walmart that I have ever been. It was like Black Friday times 10.
Oh, wow.
The pallets were stacked with vacuum cleaners and toaster ovens and microwaves and that sort of stuff. But give credit to, first of all, to the University of Waterloo that just made that whole experience incredible, moving in. And then to Walmart. I'm crediting you, Walmart, with all of the great work that you did to get us through the checkout line in a reasonable amount of time. So all of that. But then, of course, I'm a writer, and so I wanted to be able to express my feelings in some way that really worked. And I used a basic story. And I don't spend a lot of personal time on social media, but I did this time as a way to kind of rally the troops, others who've been through this. And in the end, it was great. I had the big fat tears and that sort of stuff on Sunday night, and my partner's been actually really, really supportive and helping. So I'm so grateful for that community, because it is in the same way that I tell kids that their first year of university, their first few months is probably the single largest disruption and change to their life they'll ever have. Even if you get married and have a baby and buy a new house in 1 year, which some people do, that transition from being a kid to getting into university and having that separation is massive, but I'm also learning it's been massive for me. So that's,
Oh, wow. For us, it was pretty much old hat. My kids are in 5th and 3rd grade, so there wasn't a heck of a lot of change. But it is.
Was today first day or yesterday?
Yesterday was first day.
And how did I know one of yours is not a morning person.
She's not a morning, she's just not she's not a many-thing person. So first day, so it's really interesting when you have two kids, when you have more than one kid, you kind of really see the different personalities. And so my older child is born with a smile, happy-go-lucky all the time, positive. She thinks everything is great all the time. And then the second one has a very dark view on the world, on life, on just everything. And so even trying to take a picture of them on their first day, I had my older kid who was huge smiles, and you can just tell her body there was just energy in her body. And then the younger one had this doubtful look, why are you throwing me to the wolves today? And then we, and it was like a solemn march for her all the way to the block to school. And for my other one, she was skipping. She's like, I'm so excited. I'm going to see everybody. And so it was like managing the two personalities and trying to give them each what they needed. So at one point I'd turn and I would be like, oh my God, this is so great to my older one. And then I'd turn around and I'm like, it's going to be okay, honey. So it was like this split personality.
I see a TV show in this, I think,
it's
somewhere.
just...
And how about the end of the day? Like, what was it what were they like when they came home?
So I actually ended up passing by the school because I have an after-school care. So I was trying to get to a coffee shop so I could do a little bit of more work. And so I ended up seeing them. And they both had jubilant smiles, which for my second is rare. So I knew it was a good day. And so today we took another photo. Because I was like, can we just take a photo where everybody's happy? And although I can't I don't want to discredit or tell her not to feel the feelings she's feeling. But today we took a much better photo that she was happy.
That's an interesting, that idea of the challenge of taking someone who their natural approach to life is, I don't want to use the word pessimistic, but maybe that is. We'll just use optimistic, pessimistic, just as kind of a shorthand here. And the challenge between being reverent to that's who they are genetically versus what can you manage. I found this. I find this as a parent a struggle. I have 3 kids who have very, very different kind of emotional approaches. I've got one who is extremely stoic. That's the one off in university, and dad frets significantly about when stress hits. The question is, where does the line lie? What can you affect in the most positive way? I wish I had better answers for that. Yeah, and I think it's just honoring the way I approach it is just honor each of them individually, and if that's the experience, I don't want to I don't ever say to my younger, why can't you just be happy like your sister? That's just not her, and I don't want her to compare herself or to wish that she was more like her sister, or even the other way around, because my younger one is very astute socially, so she can kind of pick up on things. And there are times I want to say to my older one, why can't you be like your younger sister more? But I don't. One of the years, because I this is my little hobby, right, is the idea of this emotional intelligence and how we kind of work at the world is, I listen to these podcasts fairly frequently about developing the strategies for survival and success, right, which is I'm not... it's like saying to somebody who suffers from extreme anxiety, don't be anxious. That's never a realistic thing. Yeah. The question is, be anxious, but develop the strategies that can help you navigate most effectively through that. And that's where I kind of sit with my kids as well. But schools make it a little harder. Both a couple of the schools that I'm dealing with actually changed the start time to 30 minutes earlier than they were before, which is funny because it seems to fly in the face of a lot of the research that we're seeing, which is particularly for teenagers and high school kids, that the serotonin doesn't kind of like wake them up until they're, I think I've read between 10 and 11 a.m. And there are a couple of schools in Toronto that have actually done that. They've gone to a later start time because that's where the physiological profile of teenagers sits, right? It's not, we always love to make the joke about how like teenagers are grumpy and groggy in the morning, but there's a reason for it. There's actually a physical reason, which is there are certain chemicals in the brain that only kick in for teenagers for certain hours during the day. And that happens for teenagers who are going to sleep at a proper time? See, that's the thing is a proper time is that's a social construct. So what they're saying is that 11 a.m. is kind of when they truly wake up, 10 to 11, and 7 p.m. And I'm sure there's some professional out there who's screaming at their radio right now, going, "You've got that wrong." But the truth is that I do know that it is about a chemical thing that allows them to do that. I'm going to do some more research on that. Yeah. But it does exist. I don't know. I don't know I'm not an expert in any way, but I always approach things like, well, if your start time is this, then figure out a proper bedtime for you that would give you enough sleep so that you can function at that time in the morning. The thing is that it's all about responsibility. But the thing is the challenge is that what experts say is it's not about sleeping at a proper time because we have different sleep cycles and sleep rhythms. I think we were talking about this before. Was that kids or people sleep at 150 years ago that they slept in 2 shifts during the night. In fact, I was talking to my son, and he said there's been a study recently that they actually put people in kind of like a cave-like setting, and they revert to that. that idea of like sleeping, waking up and sleeping when they no longer know what the time is. So the thing with teenagers, what they're learning is it's not about saying, hey, go to bed at 9 or 8, or let's say 9. And because that doesn't jive with what's happening in the brain at that time. The brain's still very active and things like that. Interesting stuff.
Yeah. I think I just come at it with a very different, maybe it's my, all I'm hearing is my parents in my head.
I'm just working from the data set.
Yeah. So I'm working more from the experience of what would my parents say if I were to have said, my brain doesn't function till 11 a.m. I wonder.
Well, and so this is a decent kind of transition into what we want to talk about today, which is something that I think over the last couple of decades has really gone through a shift in our perception of this and how we come at that. And that is postpartum depression. And we want to start today with a bit of a trigger warning. I'm going to introduce you.
Yeah. So I just, putting it out there that we are going to talk about some heavy stuff today. Postpartum depression is, and we're going to talk about the symptoms and the signs of it. And, just hearing it, and we're going to be talking also to a woman named Amanda Munday who wrote a memoir about her pretty harrowing experience with postpartum depression. She had a very severe, rare form of it. But I just wanted to just put it out there to the audience that if you are feeling any kind of anxiety or worries that, our intention here isn't to create more of that for you. Rather, we're here to inform because I believe that, and I think, when I was having that conversation with Amanda and Jason, I think you agree with us that the more we share our experiences, the less stigmatized it becomes and the more normal it becomes. Because for some women, not for every single woman, postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety in some form may happen. Again, it's only for some women.
And maybe that's a good place to start the conversation is to put the stakes in the ground. Because, again, as someone who is a support system for those for moms who have postpartum depression, is that, there's a lot of things that in this research that surprised me, right? And the first one is the basic. I remember back in, when I was a teenager and things like that, the term baby blues was a common term, and then it didn't seem to have the gravitas, like it wasn't taken as seriously as it could. So then you heard the phrase postpartum depression. So that's where my mind freezes in amber, which is to say, oh, well, baby blues isn't a thing. Postpartum depression is, which is actually not true.
Yeah, baby blues is.
So there's kind of three, and there are more, but there are really kind of three areas that the baby blues, which is that idea of, in the days just after giving birth and things like that, the sort of impact that can have and the feeling, and that can be everything from loss of appetite to not sleeping to just, sadness and crying, and to postpartum depression, which kind of mimics that more traditional approach to depression, which can run the gamut from, traditional PTSD. What's interesting about postpartum depression when we look at it is I always thought of it as a purely physiological thing, much like you might say, dopamine receptors or serotonin is not being gelled in traditional depression. But the truth is that in the readings that I've come up with is that postpartum depression can also affect dads. It can also affect adoptive parents. So it is actually a grander thing, and we're going to kind of unpack that a little bit more. And sorry.
Yeah. One of the things that a lot of women struggle with and is that they think that there's something wrong with them. And yes, there are a lot of hormones at play, but as you were saying, that this could also affect dads. So there are also things happening outside of us that have us react to it. So there are a lot of social pressures, a lot of, it's overwhelming to have a child. So a lot of things are happening, and it's the way we process them. So it's not something that is wrong with you. And many times it's not all about, what's happening inside you. A lot of times moms say, I've had this, so I'm not a good enough mom. And, we've heard so many, Hollywood stars, they have come out and they've talked about it and how they have said, I think it was Chrissy Teigen who said for so long, I'm this model, I'm the wife of John Legend. I finally have this baby after having so much trouble trying to have a baby. And she goes on to talk about how she felt so lucky and yet she was feeling these feelings and she felt so much shame and just felt like she wasn't good enough. She wasn't deserving of all the fortune that she had. And so I think we need more and more people to, if they've had that experience, to share it. And for us, for those who have not had it, to listen so that they can be more informed and they can make knowledgeable choices going forward on how to best support women.
To me, that was almost the most surprising thing, was the fact that there's still such a stigma and shame around postpartum depression in a society where we tend to put so many resources and try to be so empathetic about depression and anxiety in culture. The fact that it almost feels like maybe we haven't given this enough focus to say, hey, you know what, this is also something that's really, really important, and it's real, and we need to take it very seriously.
That what you just said is surprising to me, that you were surprised that there's the stigma, because I just being having two children and birthing them myself and having the experiences of the hormones and just even the social pressures, because I think a lot of it, again, I don't know, I'm not a medical practitioner in any way, but I feel that the social pressures sometimes can become too great and can make a small problem much bigger, and so there's all this pressure on women to be the perfect mom, and when you're excessively crying, or you're feeling depressed, or you're feeling like you can't have that connection with your child, or any kind of hopelessness or worthlessness, those are some of the symptoms of postpartum depression. And if you're feeling those things when everyone is telling you that this is the most joyful moment of your life, relish it, take it all in, all of those amazing messages that people give you, and that's what you're feeling, you're like, well, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Why can't I enjoy this? Because this is supposed to be the most amazing time of my life, and yet I don't feel like that. And so then, and I think that's why a lot of women for so long, and still to this day, keep quiet. Because
that's the part that I find surprising, which is, I think, in a modern mental health society that we still have that challenge. So I'm hopeful that things like these kind of discussions will help kind of remove that stigma.
Yeah. And next, right after the break, we will be coming back with Amanda Munday, and she is going to share a little bit more about her experience, but also the amazing outcome that has come out of her journey. So we will be back. You are listening to Parents Canada Talk Radio on Saga 960.
Welcome back to Parents Canada Talk Radio. I'm Jason Thompson.
And I'm Lisa Durante.
We are going to jump right into this, but again, I kind of want to repeat our trigger warning, because this is a very significant interview. If you have any issues around postpartum depression, this could be a bit of a trigger for you, but truly our hope from this interview and conversation is that it informs you and really helps you understand where help can come from. So our guest today is Amanda Munday. She is the founder of The Workaround. It's a co-working space with childcare in Toronto. I think I should have underscored with childcare in Toronto. She's a storyteller, and she's got a lot of experience helping companies go through social media and traditional marketing and public relations. Person after my own heart. Her first memoir is called Day 9, and it talks about her experience of severe postpartum depression, and that actually culminated in an 18-day involuntary stay in a Toronto psychiatric ward. And this is the story that she's going to tell us today. She has received international media coverage for being known as an inspirational speaker in Forbes magazine. Got a little jealous when I read that. That's always a good thing. And she's a regular contributor to the Globe and Mail on topics from economic opportunities for women and universal childcare. So let's welcome her to the show. Amanda, hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi.
Yeah, so great to talk with you, and I'm so glad that you're sharing your story not only in your memoir Day 9, which folks should really get a copy of that, but here today with us as well. So yeah, I would love for you to share a little bit more about your experience and tell us the story, kind of bring us along that journey that you went through.
Of course. So you read the bio about my experience in marketing and PR, and so my way that I start this story is to say I am the A-type, ambitious, driven professional. I've been working my whole career in marketing, on track for chief marketing officer. Was pregnant about 5 years ago, and did all I took multiple rounds of prenatal classes, like not just one prenatal class. At 5 months pregnant, I was like, is it too soon to start the prenatal classes? Like I need to be prepared. So I really felt like I had all of the boxes checked in terms of preparation for parenthood. And when my daughter was 9 days old, I was diagnosed with severe postpartum depression. So what happens in those 9 days from I'm ready for this baby to psych ward? My daughter was born breech, which means she came out backwards, feet first instead of head first. So it was a vaginal breech delivery, which 5 years ago in Toronto was pretty rare. I think there were only a handful of doctors that would even be willing to perform that type of labor. And because I had a midwife, I was released from the hospital within 4 hours. So there was no transfer of care to the hospital. I was home. She was born at 9 p.m. I was home by midnight. That night, I did not sleep. I was running on adrenaline. You know, people were high-fiving me at the hospital, like, this amazing birth happened. She came out backwards. You did it. Ah. You know, I felt like a rock star. And then 24 hours later, I'm still without any sleep. And now I'm trying to nurse and breastfeed, but it's not going very well. I don't understand this latching thing. It hurts. My body hurts. I'm in recovery from childbirth. I'm exhausted, and I'm not hungry. And that sort of pattern of can't sleep, don't feel like eating, can't settle my mind persisted for the full 9 days. And so when I say I didn't sleep, I mean I did not sleep.
Really?
When I was, you know, my husband, my mother, my brother, people would come over, take the baby, say, go upstairs, turn off the lights, get in the dark, try to sleep. And I would lie there with racing thoughts about, you know, when the next feed was coming. I felt this sense of dread constantly that I was failing her because I wasn't nursing as easily. I worried about her safety and all of the different horrific ways that she might die. And that's when I really started to get scared. You know, why can't I make these thoughts stop? Why can't I just fall asleep? And so I was talking to my midwife this whole time, and it was with her in a conversation with a friend where they both agreed, listen, if you can't settle these thoughts, if you can't find a way to rest, you should probably go to the ER. They'll be able to address this, get some sort of urgent care for you.
And I really think that what you just said in the last 3 sentences really needs to be reinforced, because you start to go through the cycle, and the fact that you were talking to a midwife and talking to other people and reflecting your experience, first of all, giving yourself permission to do that is a huge leap for some parents, right, when they're trying to get past the shame. And secondly is to identify, to say, you know what, something's not right here that I can't control. I'm going to do something about that. And that there is, you know, medical professionals and leaders and that sort of stuff who will help step in and help guide you to the right thing. Nobody's going to, you know, if you're suffering in this way, nobody's going to do anything negative towards you or your child. If that happens, they're there to help. So I really want to stress that.
Yeah, and that's so critical to my story, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the act of going from being alone in my bedroom, crying, nervous, worried about what's going on, looking up, you know, symptoms on the internet about what's happening, reading all these horror stories about worst case scenarios.
You got to stay away from WebMD. That's always a good piece of advice for any parent. Yeah. Stay away from WebMD.
The Google is helpful for diaper rashes, not so good with sleep deprivation and suicidal thoughts.
And you know, that's the other thing, is when you're under such 9 days of no sleep, I mean, you're not it's almost like you're not human at that stage, right? It's you're not thinking clearly at all. And so that ability to reach out is a really big thing.
Totally disassociative. And the thing is, so medical and hormonal and driven by things that were not my fault, right? Yeah. Sleep deprivation it was the diagnosis for me. When I got to the ER, I thought they would give me a sleeping pill and knock me out. And instead I was told, you know, you're going to come with us to the psychiatric ward. We're going to hold you. At the time, we had thought it would be a 72-hour hold where they could observe me and maybe put me on some medication and watch. I ended up staying 18 days. And the reason I wrote the book and why I tell this story is to say, I really think a lot of parents are afraid to speak out, afraid to say that they're having these thoughts because they're worried about what might happen when they do. And what I want to stress so clearly is that a lot of those worst-case things happened to me. I was committed to a psychiatric ward. I was put on observation with my child, wasn't allowed to be alone with her for months. I had to go into day passes where, staggered approach back home. Children's Protective Services, Children's Aid was called and came into my home. Like all these things we worry about.
Mm-hmm. They happen.
And I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the exclamation point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you 18 days, and then you did talk about those day passes. So can you explain what maybe some of that recovery was like for you?
Mm-hmm. So it was sleep. I was really, I will admit, I was pretty frustrated when I would meet with the doctors in the hospital and they would say to me, this is sleep driven. I wanted them to tell me I had some previous lifelong mental illness, that I had schizophrenia or bipolar, and it had been gone undiagnosed. That wasn't the case. It was truly severe sleep deprivation that put me into a dissociative state. And so the time in the psychiatric ward was mostly weaning on meds, spending time talking about some of the pressures I was putting on myself around having to be the primary caregiver, the shame that I felt about struggling with breastfeeding, struggling with, I don't want to do this, it hurts, I'm having a hard time, but if I give her formula, I've failed, because I'm in that organic, left-leaning, farmers market, strutting family, and I had fully and truly consumed all of the messages that formula was a chemical and processed food and bad. And it took a long time to unlearn those messages and to understand that treating myself well, sleeping, getting rest was the key to being a good parent, to taking good care of my child.
Yeah.
And that was most of the work that I did.
Yeah. It's and we talked about this right before the break, Amanda, was the social pressures that are placed on moms. And you talked just so, those messages are out there, and we kind of internalize them, and then that becomes the definition for that's a good mom. And then when we can't breastfeed, for example, all of a sudden, that relationship, we are no longer a good mom because we can't do those things. What's interesting is, I know you said it was 9 days and it was very much driven because of your lack of sleep, but because one of the things we're hoping comes out of this discussion is what those partners or parents of those who have had who have just had a baby, how they can better support new parents. And so, what were some of those things that maybe some folks had said to you that weren't helping you to calm your mind and things like that?
Yeah, there's a lot of well-intentioned advice that happens to a new parent, especially when you're a first-time parent. Sleep when the baby sleeps is one big one that I felt a lot of pressure on, because I thought, listen, I'm trying to sleep and I can't. So this just sleep when the baby sleeps and you'll survive felt like a death sentence to me. Other ones like, it's normal, breastfeeding is supposed to hurt, it's supposed to be awful, I went through it, it was worse, here's my horror story. Those types of well-meaning advice from friends and family can be really tough when you're in a desperate feeling. To me, what was much more helpful was, it's okay to feel crappy. It's okay to take a break. And having close people reiterate to me, you are doing a good job. You are not failing. You haven't broken your baby. You're not broken. This is not something we can't recover from. And reiterating over and over, like, look what just happened. This is a monumental event, regardless of how you acquired that baby. If it was adoption, a cesarean section, a vaginal birth, it is a massive, monumental life shift. And it's okay to take a pause and recognize it's not all going amazingly on day one. Because for me, that was the message over and over again in my head. I can't breastfeed. I'm the worst parent. I've given her formula. I've ruined her. I can't do skin to skin 12 hours a day because I need to be away from her. She's never going to bond with other people. Like the absolutes that were running through my head were constant, and the sort of sleep when the baby sleeps, this is all normal, you're fine, it'll pass, is really hard for someone like me.
Yeah. So one of the things, because you had talked about the fears that you had, and you talked about, just all of these feelings. I would love to, before we go to commercial break, if you can just share what has happened since, and how you have moved on from that, and your relationship with your daughter, because you were talking about the bonding.
Mm-hmm.
How has it been since?
Mm-hmm. I actually have another child. So, I got pregnant again when my daughter was 18 months old, so relatively quickly. And I always like to say that I acknowledge that there's so many people that struggle with fertility, and having children can be very difficult and very expensive and time-consuming. In my case, that wasn't the case. My second pregnancy showed up unannounced, and the hospital that I was still seeing said to me, you will have postpartum depression again. It will be worse. Mm-hmm. And so I went into that second pregnancy full of a new level of fear.
I was going to say, that must have been terrifying.
What's worse? What's going to be worse than
Right.
what happened the first time? So I did a lot of things. I went through a mindfulness course at the hospital, an 8-week morning course. I really got into a free YouTube track mindfulness that I played and listened to at night when I struggled to fall asleep. I focused on drinking a lot of water and taking walks, like really light, just everyday practices that could put my body and my mental state first. And when my son was born, no PPD.
No.
Wow.
And so I've done a lot of reflection. He's 3 now. He just turned 3 last week. Why was it so severe the first time and not the second time? And I believe that it has so much to do with me releasing this idea of what it means to be a good parent, to be a good mother. I had rolled in the truckload of formula from Costco before I bought a single onesie with my second pregnancy. That baby was handed off to my partner within hours of getting home. And I allowed all of that to be, as free-flowing and mistake-driven as possible, to say, I'm still a good parent, and we're doing okay, and we're going to get through this hard time. And that's it, full stop. Mm-hmm. We're just going to do the best we can. So now my daughter is 5, my son is 3, and we're doing really well. We're doing great. I love my children. We have a great relationship. There are days where I don't want to play 2 more hours of Lego all over the floor like other parents, and I fiercely love them. And we have great times and activities and moments together. I wrote a book. It's a bestseller. It's been in the U.S. and Canada. I opened a business called The Workaround, as you mentioned, which is a co-working space that has childcare on site. And the whole reason why I launched The Workaround was to tell parents that you can do both, that your life before you had kids can exist with your children, and you don't have to say goodbye to that part of yourself and your identity, and you can still be around and with your children in a city like Toronto, where childcare is so incredibly unaffordable.
Yeah, I have been to The Workaround. I have worked out of there, and it's a great space.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we are going to head to break. You are listening. But Amanda, if you could please stick around. We did get some questions, I know, from social media. Jason, I know you have a few, and I do as well. So it'd be great if you could stick around and we can kind of chat through them. So,
okay, of course.
That's great. So you are listening to Parents Canada Talk Radio on Saga 960, and we're going to be right back.
Welcome back to Parents Canada Talk Radio. We are speaking with author Amanda Munday. She wrote Day 9, which is a book that really talks about her experience with postpartum depression, as she described, really where all of the boxes were ticked on everything that could possibly go wrong. And she really She said a lot of really fascinating things today, but I think for me, the thing that's really been high impact is this one phrase. And I feel like this one phrase sums up the entire Parents Canada Talk radio show, which is really being reverent and understanding what it means to be a good parent. Because I think sometimes the standards that we are setting for ourselves are social based. So we feel pressure from those around us, from the past, like the way that our parents raised us or the way that people around us talk about the advice that they give, and giving into that. And again, it's a natural part of who we are as parents. But that thing is kind of the defining issue, right? Whether you are struggling with breastfeeding or you have kids heading out to university and think, have I prepped them effectively? It becomes an identity issue, and that identity issue can have, in some places, catastrophic outcomes if you internalize it and you don't reach out and you don't connect with the world around you. So I think that, to me, that line, what it means to be a good parent, I think and I think I've said it on a past show, is we got to cut ourselves some slack as parents. It's okay. Right? It's okay to what was the line she used? It's okay to feel crappy. It's okay to take a break. You're doing a good job. No parent is doing this. There is no such thing as a parent in this world who is doing things so perfectly that their child comes out as some sort of next generation superstar that is going to do every single thing right. We are dealing with human beings who are organisms, and they have their own opinions about things, and we're dealing with physiological elements, particularly with postpartum depression, like sleep deprivation, that you can't control. So I think I just wanted to start there by just reminding everyone that it's you're okay, and it's okay to reach out and to feel badly. Yeah. So Amanda,
it would be great to, like we said, we got some questions, because this, once it was posted out there, I have to say I got some responses, but I felt like some of the responses that were sent over, the DMs that were sent my way, were a little bit guarded, and a lot of it was, well, how do I know that, it's one over the other? And you had said that, for you, it was the lack of sleep. And there's a difference between the baby blues and postpartum depression. But from someone who has experienced it, and I know that your experience was quite extreme, but do you know when you're going through it that this isn't right? Or was it only when you heard it from your midwife and your friend, okay, I think you need to get to the ER?
So here's the thing. This is so connected to stigma around mental health.
Yeah.
If I had a broken arm, I wouldn't be expected to diagnose the broken bone, right? My arm hurts. I don't know if it's sprained, it's broken, it's fractured. I don't know, but it hurts. So I'm going to go and tell some people that my arm hurts, and someone's going to fix it. And with mental health, we worry about the stigma, the shame, the criticism that might come from saying, I don't feel good. So, I mean, from my perspective, I'm not a doctor, and it's hard to diagnose or give medical advice. But what I say is, if you can find some assurance that going in to a medical professional, a close friend, a psychiatrist, a doctor, pharmacist, and saying, I don't feel good, I don't know why. It's a great first step. And if you talk to a person, you go into a family doctor, you talk to a friend, and you say, I don't feel good, and they shrug it off, tell someone else.
Oh, yeah.
Tell somebody else that you don't feel good until somebody hears you and says, let's figure out what treatment is going to work for you. And maybe the treatment means, I'm going to come and hold your baby for 2 hours and you're going to go for a walk. Or maybe the treatment is the psychiatric ward. And all of those things are okay. I launched a business, wrote a book, had 2 kids, all after having what a lot of people would fear to be the worst case scenario that's speaking out.
I'm curious, I want to kind of give the flip side to that as the dad who, having 3 kids, I've seen postpartum depression from the outside and tried to be supportive. One of the big struggles that I had was saying, I could see that something wasn't right, but convincing my partner to say, hey, listen, it's okay to put your hand up and do something about it was a bit of a struggle. because they were resistant because I think they kept telling themselves that it'll snap into place, and I'm okay, everything's going to be okay. And so that led to some. I remember one occasion where I basically said, "Look, you're exhausted." And let me take the baby, and and literally standing in my dining room and having kind of like a almost like a showdown. It felt like. So, what kind of advice can you give to those around you to kind of help surface those challenges and to demonstrate that being supportive is okay?
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest pieces when it's one thing, in my case where I said, help now, I need it, and I opted for it. It's much different when the person hasn't acknowledged that the problem is there or doesn't think they need treatment. Some strategies that have worked with me with other friends where I've recognized some postpartum depression is to plant some seeds, and not diagnose and sort of say, I think you have this illness, but to say, you know what helped me? I find taking a break where I have some unstructured, unplanned time each day is really well. Is that something that you might want to have? It's not going to happen immediately, but planting seeds and suggestions is a nice way to let the person say, yeah, I would really like a break, or no, being away from the baby makes me feel worse. What I could really use right now is someone to make dinner so I can sit here and just focus on the baby because that's what I want to do. That could be really helpful. Having sort of, here's what I'm going to do for you right now conversation can really help the person to not have to say what they need before they really can understand the treatment, right? Because we don't know what's going on.
And I'm seeing some
I'm going to take care of groceries, for a friend. I'm going to have groceries sent to you tomorrow morning. Is that helpful? Even that can make a big difference.
And that's that idea of not trying to bite the apple all in one bite, but to kind of like pre-sell in some ways, right? Yeah. The individual, it really does help.
Test it out, right? So I think we should all try to get outside for a bit. What do you think about going for a walk? Let's try that. Or how about you go for a walk? I'm going to stay here with the baby. Or I'm going to take the baby out for a walk. You just sit here and just see how, and then have a quick conversation. How did that go? Did you want more of that, less of that? How can we do better tomorrow? And see where that goes. And if you're saying, I think maybe we should go to the doctor and talk to them, that could also be okay, because it doesn't mean that, it's very unlikely that you will be immediately committed the way I was. It's more likely that a doctor will have more conversations, will make recommendations, will talk to you about some options. So taking a step to go and have an appointment, talk to somebody, reach out, tell them you're not feeling well is a great first step in a larger plan to feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Amanda, following up on Jason's question, really about what is it that those around you can do? Because I feel that the social pressures, because I felt it as a new mom each time, just like to breastfeed and how like it had to work. And I worked really hard at it. And I had my mom who she was constantly telling me, formula's fine. You were raised on formula. You turned out fine. It's all okay. And at times, I will tell you that I thought she was trying to undermine me. But over time, because she kept repeating those messages, I started to put less pressure on myself. So the question really is, how can we, those on the outside, those supporting new parents, what are the things we can do to lessen some of that social pressure and the expectations? Because sometimes we, especially when you're a new mom, type A people, we just want to get it all right and perfect. So what would you say, that we could say to that?
I liken it to social media and the Pinterest families and the perfect birthday parties and the, picture perfect birth announcements and gender reveals and all these things we do. I think as supporters of new parents, we can come forward with examples of normal, everyday, non-glamorous life. Look at this mom I saw on Instagram who said she hasn't taken a shower in four days. That seems average and regular.
I think you just came up with an idea for a social media platform called Real Book. I love it. I'm in.
Real Book.
Let's
bring some story. Or, I was talking to my cousin, and she mentioned that breastfeeding was really painful and hard for her, and so she mixed breastfeeding and formula. I don't know, maybe that's an idea. Like normalizing the sort of crappy and uncertainty and regular, boring, old, monotonous parenthood days will help, I think, to bring down some of those A-type, perfection-seeking parents like me who feel like there's no other way but perfect. And just bringing great stories, reiterating you're doing a good job, it's all good, being wowed by the fact that they've accomplished whatever they accomplished for the day. So, one thing I like to do with a new parent is if I see them out on the street, one of the first things I say is like, wow, awesome that you left the house today. Because probably it was a mission to get out of the house. And it's nice to just say to them, like, good for you that you got out of here. And those track pants look comfy. I'm jealous that I'm not wearing track pants. And it might be enough to just lift them out of that perpetual I'm failing mindset.
Yeah.
I like that a lot, that idea of just recognize those small personal milestones, because you don't know where someone is at that point.
Yeah, and even that context of sharing the examples of others who are not as perfect, because I'm always my youngest is 8, so especially Instagram, I don't think that was around, was it? Maybe it was, but I wasn't on it, so there wasn't a lot of social media around that I could look at other people and say, oh, how perfect they have it. So I didn't feel a lot of that pressure, I don't think. But I now see all the pictures and I worry for new parents on how they can keep up. Because, some of those pictures, they just look, I don't know how they look so fantastic. I'm 8 years out and I don't look that fantastic.
That's the elevator pitch for Real Book right there, I think.
And saying get off social media is just another way to make parents feel shame.
Yeah.
So what I don't want to do is say, get off your phone. Because when it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you've been up all night and you're lonely and you're staring at this little baby who's not talking to you, like Facebook groups and Instagram, these things can be lifelines to an adult world and conversation. So, like, don't feel bad if you're Instagram surfing at 2 in the morning.
Thank you.
Just try to find some channels where you've got a little more Real Book. And remember that people are putting forward, the perfect presentation to the aunts and uncles and grandmas who are on the feed, right?
I love that, just that whole idea of you may be the first guest that we've ever had who have actually found a good side to social media. So thank you for that. Really kind of feeding into my own personal perceptions on things, I guess.
You just wanted permission. Isolation is real. Early days of parenthood is isolating.
Yeah, and it's so hard to get out. Did you find even getting out a good way to feel better? Yes, we here at the Workaround, we have a mom group that comes in on Thursdays, and the babies are always so perfectly dressed. And I always say, how come these babies always look so cute? And usually the response is something like, I've been planning it all week. Like, I've been planning to leave the house. I've been planning for this meetup group all week. And that was certainly my experience, that, if I got out of the house, I felt really accomplished. Even if I set a destination like the local coffee shop, I'm going to put this baby in a stroller and we are going, and I'm thinking about the latte, and it's going to be big and extra sized with 2 double shots, and I'm getting it and I'm going to enjoy it and I'm going to come back. And when I get back, I'm going to feel awesome because I did it. Yeah. And it's that incremental compounding growth of, like, maybe next time I'm going to try the grocery store and we're going to see if we can navigate that, or we're going to try, an activity with the baby in a mom group or a songs group or something. And then, you slowly each day build a routine where leaving the house, meeting other people, having conversations makes sort of some of the struggle and isolation of the late nights a little easier. That's great. Amanda, I think I can talk with you all day, but we do have to go to another break. Before we do, where can we learn more about you? Where can we find Day 9? Let us know. Yes, so if you are Instagram surfing, you can find me at Munday Writes, Munday Writes, or The Workaround. We're on all the social platforms and the web, and that's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Perfect. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Hey, guess what?
Oh,
we went so
we
long
went so
today.
long.
We ran out of time.
Oh, goodness.
That's how excited we were. We thought we were going into break 3. So, you know what? That's going to be the show. But I do really want to stress to everyone who is listening today, because we really hit those trigger warnings at the beginning, but at the end is to say, it's okay. And please, if you do find yourself struggling with this, reach out, because there are people who do want to truly, truly help you. There's a bunch of resources on the Parents Canada website, everything from there's a series of articles about, shame and how to kind of get over that sort of thing. So please do check that out. Just do a search at the brand new Parents Canada website. That's it actually for this week. So I want to thank everybody for listening to Parents Canada Talk Radio. We'll hear you. We'll reconnect with you next week on News Talk Saga 960.
Take care.